For those of y'all that do not know me, my name is Cathy Carroll. I am the clinical educator here at Methodist Children's Hospital. I work in the emergency department. I've been in that department for about 14 years as the educator for the past 4.5 years or so. And I have to tell you that this came about because of a purely evidence, and this is really going to be evidence-based practice because it's evidence that proves that that we can make a difference in the lives of little babies. So when you make it through this process and get done, that is one of the messages that I want you to get from this. So I want to introduce Dr. McClain to you. Dr. McClain is a Bexar County medical examiner. He grew up in North Texas. He graduated from Crowley High School in 1999. He then went to the University of Texas at Arlington, graduated in 2003 with a Bachelor of Science degree in biology with an emphasis on forensics. He attended medical school in Houston, graduated with a medical doctorate degree in 2007, completed his residency training in anatomic pathology and clinical pathology in San Antonio in 2011, and then a one-year fellowship in forensic pathology at the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office in 2012. He then went and worked as a medical examiner in Dallas from the summer of 2012 until May of 2015, when he then came to San Antonio to work for the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office. His special interest, you'll have to ask him about this, is skeletonized remains, childhood deaths, and educating young people and his peers. He lives with his wife and his 4 sons who range from the age of 1 to 9. Our guest speaker, Dr. William McClain.
Hello. Good morning. Thanks for coming out and making this really worthwhile. Obviously, if you guys aren't here to learn about it, then you know, there's no ears to hear it, and then you can't teach the parents and the patients out there, right? This is a sensitive topic for me. I've got 4 boys of my own. Always, of course, from my own personal perspective and my own personal interest, obviously I love my children, but it is a passion that I have to take care of living people by way of speaking for the deceased, right? So in the same way that we study diseases, we study after some catastrophic event, and we go back and look at what happened so that we can find out where the failures happened and troubleshoot. That's what the medical examiner does. Obviously, we've got car crashes and those traumatic deaths, and a lot of information can come from that. Seatbelt safety, helmet safety, those things. But with this kind of a topic, when we're referring to infant deaths, this is an area where there could be simple steps that save a countless number of lives. A number could never actually be put on the lives that are saved. And we've seen this with the Back to Sleep campaign, things like that. We'll never really know how many lives were saved by the Back to Sleep campaign or by the campaign to raise awareness about keeping your kid in the car, right, forgetting your kid. We'll never know those numbers. It's impossible to ever tell. But we can identify the trends, and hopefully as awareness goes up, those numbers go down, and that gives us an idea, right? And so that's what we have here with this same situation. Now we all agree that vaccinations are probably, well, maybe we don't all agree, but a lot of people agree that vaccinations, for example, are things that help our children, or seat belts, obviously, right? These are direct ways. However, we recommend that we put our kid in the car seat, but we also know that good drivers and the chances of anyone being in a car crash are very low. So are we actually, you know, saving a child on that particular car trip? If there was no car crash, then I guess it didn't really matter whether the kid was buckled up or not, right? But we certainly would never have our kids ride without being in a car seat. And so, but this situation with the bed sharing, the co-sleeping, there is a direct link between a deceased child in bed and the situation, the environment, the co-sleeping or the unsafe sleep environment. So a great area where we can make a strong impact. So our objectives going through this, we've got number 1, to gain an understanding of what this problem is, and then to educate ourselves on the 3 different types. It's more or less broken down of sudden, unexplained, or unexpected infant death, or SUID. Number 2, we want to examine the causes and the problem of sleep-related infant deaths in Bexar County. Right, so we've got to figure out what it is that drives people to put the babies in bed with them, and then what we can do about it. We want to talk about the 3 risk factors for SIDS. And there may be more than that, but number 4, distinguish the key risk reduction practices that we can put in place to make the sleep environment safer for these infants. And then review the common concerns that parents have in regards to the back to sleep and the other sleep situations. And to continue, we'll discuss common barriers as to why parents, caregivers, grandparents just don't comply with with these recommendations. Specify ways that we as the healthcare providers can educate these parents, can educate the caregivers. And like anything else, we have to model that. You guys have to model that, right? When you're caring for these infants in the hospital, you have to be consistent with this. You also have to be mentioning this in your interactions with the new parents. And then you guys will learn how to implement that, how to maintain that, and help the whole system operate in this manner on a consistent basis. So just a few definitions here. SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, and we've all heard about this. Now, by definition, it's a death of a otherwise seemingly healthy infant. Most people use a cutoff age of 1 year, so under 1 year of age. These deaths almost always occur during sleep, and the cause of which can't be determined. Even after a full autopsy, a full investigation, we exhausted every possible lead, used the most sophisticated test available to mankind, and we still cannot determine the cause of death. Detectives have grilled the parents and whoever was around, and we still can't figure out what happened. Now, another definition I'll offer for you is a sudden, unexplained, or unexpected infant death. I tend to personally use the word unexplained. To me, unexpected is sort of repetitive for sudden. There's the rare, sudden, expected infant death, I guess. But to me, unexplained really clarifies better. And that's the SUID. It's the death of an infant younger than 1 year of age that occurs suddenly and unexpectedly. Now, there are many different causes that could lead to this category, right? So, of course, this could be suffocation, entrapment, infection, that sort of thing. In that case, if you're referring to the suffocation or entrapment type, where you essentially know the cause, then I guess sudden unexpected would be a better definition. Sudden unexplained infant death, to me, does not include these, because these have been ruled out. That's why it's unexplained. Does that make sense? By the way, those are very subtle differences in terminology, but SIDS versus the SUID, using those 2 different terms really mean drastically different things. It means different things when you hear them in your mind, the feeling that you have inside when someone says SIDS versus sudden unexplained infant death probably gives you a different feeling in your gut, and it should, and especially with a parent, and we'll talk about that later. Another category that falls under this sudden infant death is accidental suffocation and strangulation in bed, ASSB. This is, to me, kind of a new terminology. And that's good. It's a sort of a coding designation. It's a category so that we're all using the same terminology and that sort of stuff, which is good. It helps with research, right? It helps with billing and coding and those kinds of things, but helps us to identify trends. And that's sort of self-explanatory. So your overlay asphyxia or overlay smothering or suffocation, where the adult is rolling over onto the infant in a sleep, would fall under that category if it can be demonstrated, if it can be proven, if the co-sleeping adult says, yes, this is what happened. All right, now we'll talk about co-sleeping. There's a little bit of wiggle room on how you use that term too. Co-sleeping, generally, most people will say means sleeping in the same room either on the same surface or not, so as to be able to see, hear, touch, smell the infant and know what the infant is doing, right? So a lot of people, including myself, advocate co-sleeping in the sense of sharing the same room, the same sleep environment, but then you get into, that's technically what we would call room sharing, right? You're in the same room, but you're on different surfaces. And not different surfaces like the same bed, but with some pillows stacked between me and the baby. But like baby is not in the same sleep surface. You can't necessarily just lean over and touch the baby. You actually have to reach over into the crib or the pack and play, right? So that's room sharing. Bed sharing is when infant and adult, or infant and sibling, or infant and dog are on the same surface. And obviously, most of those bed sharing environments are with adults, and they're in adult beds with the big down comforter, the fluffy pillow top mattress, and the pillows. All right, so about SUID and SIDS. Again, SUID, the sudden, unexplained, or unexpected infant death. It's about 3,500 cases in the U.S. Per year. The cause of these deaths, again, unexplained. Most of them are occurring in an unsafe sleep environment. The research, it's tough to know. Is this the bedding? Is this the adult rolling over onto the baby? Or is this really some sort of natural phenomenon that is just poof occurring in a sleeping child? What we might call SIDS. Right? But that makes it hard to really differentiate. There are many complicating factors that skew how all of this works and how we perceive things, right? It's all about changing the way that you're viewing and defining these terms and these words in your mind so that you can clarify for your parents. So an investigation of deaths are highly inconsistent. I was in Dallas County for 3 years, and in Dallas County, they don't do any sort of reenactment. Here in Bexar County, if one of my investigators gets a call from a police officer that an infant is deceased at home, maybe even brought to the hospital and then subsequently pronounced. If it's in the hospital, my investigator goes to the hospital, documents the baby there in the ER or wherever, but then we'll also go back to the house, and we need to see that environment in which the baby's sleeping. Now my investigator here is going to take a teddy bear with movable parts and that sort of thing, and have the adult who found the infant put the teddy bear into the sleep environment. How did you place the baby? Okay, and then the next set of photos will be how did you find the baby, right? In Dallas County, they don't do that. So I worked hard at implementing that. It wasn't something that they're used to. This is traumatic to the parents. I mean, we can all imagine how it wouldn't be so comfortable to have to reenact that, right? And so, of course, we empathize with them when we're doing it here, but it's an invaluable tool that really clarifies these cases for us. But the point is that there's high variability in how these things are handled. Our medical records are viewed, every single page of every medical record, every birth record, the pediatrician records, any ER records. These things are hard to find sometimes. If you're in a small little county out in the middle of nowhere, do you have the resources to have somebody harassing these clinics for this info? Then you've got EMS arriving to the scene, right? They're destroying the situation left and right, and they have to because they're trying to save a life, and that's fine. We accept that. But they're drastically changing everything. Sometimes my investigator goes to the scene and the police and CPS workers have already taken every piece of bedding out of there. All of the formula, everything. They've got their own investigation to conduct, right? Law enforcement, are they worried that there is some foul play? So they've got parents sequestered and won't let us talk to them yet, that sort of stuff. So a thorough case investigation includes examination of the death scene. It also, this would also include going back to the house, like I said, the autopsy with every possible study that we can do, and reviewing every single page of the medical record. All right, so in general there's SIDS, and it's broken into three categories. If you're just talking strictly about a death, an infant who dies suddenly, sudden infant death syndrome. You know, we talked about it's under 1 year of age, cannot be explained despite a thorough investigation. Now this was a leading cause of death in infants under 12 months of age, right? And that's an accurate statement. If you're thinking of SIDS as just sudden infant death, I encourage you to drop that S on the end. Just call it SID, sudden infant death, right? Because it's technically not a syndrome. But if you're talking about just a category of infants who die suddenly, and that of course includes the suffocation and all those things. Now on the CDC, this is where a lot of this information came from. And they've got that first category of SIDS. Then they've got what they call an unknown cause. It's a little bit misleading. Sudden death of a child under 1 year of age, the death can't be explained. And one of their lines in their definition is that an investigation of death was not conducted, and so the cause of death cannot be determined. Well, certainly that would be true. If you don't conduct an investigation, you're probably not going to determine the cause. However, that's a little misleading because in our office, you almost assuredly will never see an autopsy report from our office in Bexar County where we use the term SIDS as the cause of death. It almost won't happen, and we'll get into why later. But the way we usually designate these in the unsafe sleep environment is sudden, unexplained infant death, SUID, and then we'll qualify it like with co-sleeping or bed sharing or in an unsafe sleep environment or what have you. But then our manner of death, we have to call it undetermined. And the reason for that is because I don't know, especially in the co-sleeping environment, the bed sharing. I don't know if the parent rolled over and accidentally asphyxiated that baby in the middle of the night. I don't know if that baby got entangled in sheets with the blankets. I don't know if it is some undiagnosed natural phenomenon that just suddenly caused the heart and lungs to stop for some unknown reason. But for that matter, I don't know if the mom didn't put a hand on the back of the baby's head, put a pillow over the face, right? So I would be derelict in calling it a natural death, wouldn't I? So I have to call it undetermined because I can't rule out either an accidental death and I can't rule out a homicidal death, right? So I'm forced to call those undetermined manner of death. And that, of course, is in a lot of people's minds the same as unknown cause. And so if I have a parent seeing my autopsy report where I called the cause of manner of death undetermined, and they go to the CDC website and see this and go, oh, my kid is in category number 2, an investigation of death was not conducted. So that, to me, is very misleading, and I'm in contact with them. Hopefully we'll get that modified. But that's the status of the CDC's definitions. Their third definition is this accidental suffocation and strangulation in bed, right? So, of course, this would not be a natural cause of death at all. This would be an accidental cause of death. This is really only so straightforward and reeks of common sense, right? But there's an insane amount of people who are putting their children in these environments on a daily basis. And that's really unfortunate. Okay, SIDS is not SUID. We are trying our best to trend away from using the term SIDS. Right, again, if you want to call it a sudden infant death, then that's a broad umbrella and there's many subcategories under that. That's fine. That's sort of, if you're riding in a car and you crash and your infant dies, that's a sudden infant death, right? Okay, so go ahead and call it sudden infant death all you want, but drop the syndrome. A syndrome is a group of symptoms that consistently occur together or a condition characterized by a set of associated symptoms. So we're talking about Down syndrome. That's a syndrome. There is a cause, a translocation of a chromosome, and there's a set of symptoms, characteristics that define that syndrome, right? So dying in your sleep is not necessarily a syndrome unless we find a particular cause for it or if there is a particular trend. Now, I suppose if we're talking about an infant in the crib with nothing else in there except for a fitted sheet on a firm mattress, perhaps we can call those deaths sudden infant death syndrome. But that implies that there is a particular cause of it, and by default, the manner of death would be a natural death, right? But what thousands and thousands of cases every year are classified as SIDS, and they're bed sharing, they're co-sleeping, they've got bottles, pillows, blankets piled in the crib. Cannot call those a natural death at all. At best, you could call it an undetermined. All right, so to carry that further, here's your CDC statistics from 2013. 45% sudden infant death syndrome. Yeah, and you can go and break those numbers down and find out that of that 45%, the majority of them have an unsafe sleep environment. These are some stats from Texas. Bed sharing was such a factor, right? So in 2015, for example, this is just as of September. These numbers haven't been updated, but there were 158. Now, look at these numbers here, the breakdown, right? So 50 of the 158, so 1/3 were African American, 1/3 were Hispanic, and then the rest. You get into sort of these risk factors, and you really have to talk about, and we have to acknowledge, if you see the risk factors for SIDS, one of them is almost always being African American or Native American / Eskimo / American, Alaskan Native, that sort of thing. And that implies that perhaps there's a genetic something or another that causes black babies to just die in their sleep, right? But if you really go and break this down and you take a second to really look at what it is, I don't think that it particularly has anything to do with being, having a particular genetic makeup. I think that it's more of a culture. It's more of a practice. It's what my parents did with me, so that's what I do with my kids, right? That's just what we've always done in our house. Okay, so that's one part of it. Another quote-unquote risk factor is lower socioeconomic status. Well, maybe there's not really anything in particular about not having much money that makes your kid prone to just die in the middle of the night, but perhaps it's that you don't have enough money to buy a crib or a pack and play, right? Or perhaps you're in a one-bedroom apartment because you don't have the money to get a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom apartment, right? So perhaps it has nothing to do particularly with just not having money. Perhaps it's more with just not being able to have those resources. The same for lower education. Same thing. It's just awareness. It's just education. It's not that people who are uneducated just tend to have babies who die in their sleep. It's that they're not aware of the problem. And they need to be educated. So we've got to change the way we view these risk factors, because the way we view them skews how we educate our patients. Okay, some case studies quickly. Case number 1, there were 2 women. We'll just call them women 1 and women 2, and they share the same house. This could be one of those weird situations. Bear with me. Both of them have infant children just 3 days apart, right? So this man lives a different lifestyle than me, but. And then, quote, the other woman's son died in the night because she lay on it, says woman number 1. Woman number 2, who is the other woman, took her dead baby when she realized in the middle of the night that her baby was dead, and went over to the room for the other woman and swapped babies. Took her live baby back to her bed with her. So when woman number 1 woke up, she's got a dead baby next to her, but she says, well, this doesn't look like my baby. I'm sure they look alike if they have the same father, but a mother can tell her baby, right? She sees that woman number 2 has her baby. This is from 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 to 28. These were the 2 women who went before King Solomon and told this story. And Solomon's wise decision was, bring me a sword, I'm going to cut the baby in half. And each woman gets half the baby, right? Then, of course, woman number 1 says, no, don't do that. Just let her have the baby, that's fine. And then woman number 2 is like, yeah, I'll cut the baby in half, that's fine. If I don't get the baby, neither does she. So that was how Solomon knew who the real mother was, right? Okay. So bed sharing is an ancient practice, right? That was written about 1,000 years before Jesus. So, case number 2. A 1-month-old girl was found face down on her pillow in the bassinet. Beautiful little bassinet, nice fitted sheet with a pillow on top. And then put the baby on top of the pillow for some reason. You know, like babies complain about their cribs not being comfortable enough. Autopsy shows no trauma, no histologic abnormality, nothing under the microscope. Toxicology is completely negative, no natural diseases, no congenital abnormalities, pregnancy was fine, birth was fine, absolutely nothing because of the negative autopsy. There was one thing. What do you see here? Right, so there's blanching on the forehead, on the nose, on the mouth, and on the chest. And then this sort of redness around here is what we call lividity, right? And so that lividity is the pooling of blood on the part of the body the closest to the center of the earth, closest to the ground, right? Once your heart quits circulating the blood, it just settles. And the mom tells me that I put the baby on her back. I went to sleep. I woke up, the baby was still on her back. Don't know what happened. And what do I say? I don't think so, right? So this one, maybe I cause of death asphyxia. The manner of death is accident. Some of my colleagues might not go that far just based on the lividity, but I felt comfortable with that. Case number 3, 29-day-old baby found dead next to parents. Face was compressed by parent's body according to the parent. So this is the rare case where the parent says, yeah, I woke up and I was smushing the baby's face with my arm, slumped over, whatever. No findings at autopsy, just like the last one. Not even the lividity this time, because the kid was indeed on his back and just had an arm or something flopped over. Cause of death, asphyxia. We will tagline that bed sharing also. Helps it stand out when we're searching. Manner of death, accident. Conclusion, it's based only on the parent's quote-unquote confession. I hate to use that word because then it sounds like there's some criminal act, but yeah, if the parent doesn't tell us this, we don't know. And we have to call it undetermined. Okay, next, a 4-month-old baby found deceased in the morning by his bed sharing parents. EMTs rush him to the hospital, right? And this happens all the time in babies that are clearly dead. It's a psychological ambulance ride because nobody wants to tell the parent, no, sorry, your baby's dead and I'm gonna go get a breakfast taco. You guys have a good day, right? So I'm gonna load the baby up, take him to the ER and let the ER physician declare him dead only after they've done everything they can, which is fine. Parents insist that, that he or she was nowhere near the baby was face up with nothing covering the airway. Autopsy shows nothing. And so we end up with inconclusive